Hi guys, Chris Dorry here. Today I'll be talking about a midfielder who will be my first picked midfielder in Supercoach next year, and he's also this year's best midfielder in the draft. You might be surprised to know, even as an underager, his stats were comparable with the best midfielders of last year's draft, and his numbers as an underager compared to last year's top prospects as underagers is actually favourable. So let's check him out. If I was just to show you these numbers in isolation from last year's NAB League finals, each player played 3 games and they all had an impact for their respective teams. And if we look at the players here, one of them is Rowell, one of them's Anderson, we've got Sarong, Flanders, and we've also got Will Phillips. But if you had to guess which of these 5 boxes was Will Phillips, who's, in my opinion, this year's best midfielder, it would be difficult to guess because all the numbers are pretty comparable. Maybe you'd probably look at this third column and think, okay, the contested possession numbers are a bit lower, clearance is a bit lower, no score assists. They're probably the weakest of the numbers, so maybe that one's him. But let's actually have a look. And as we can see here, the weakest finals series last year actually was Noah Anderson, who had really a surprisingly poor final series considering how good he's really been over the last 2 years, all things considered. But if you look at Phillips, well, his numbers are pretty solid overall. He's not really all that far behind in any category. So it really shows that if Phillips was in last year's draft, he was probably a top 10 pick pretty reasonably, even putting his age aside. Or if not, certainly top 15, given Flanders was 11. And also, while unrelated to this post, Sam Flanders' numbers were actually really strong. And in the game where he played against Rowell and Anderson, he actually, in my opinion, won that matchup in the first half, where just how he dominated was remarkable. So he's a player really over the next few years to watch out for, because he's someone where with his strength, with his capabilities, forward of centre and through the midfield, he should become a really good player for Gold Coast. Back onto Will Phillips, who of course is the focus of this video. So numbers very comparable to the others, and in my opinion he was probably the most consistent of the 5 over last year's final series. Of course Rowell had the, I guess, standout grand final, but if you look at the other games other than that, Will Phillips was arguably as good throughout the final series. I know the numbers don't fully show that, but just with his burst away from stoppages, his impact was really up there and pretty well on par. And in my opinion, he was much better than Anderson last year's pick 2. And then Sarong and Flanders, I thought he was a little more consistent then over the course of the final series. And in terms of impact per possession, probably I'd argue a little higher. So that just speaks to how advanced his game is for his age. So while we've gone through the 2019 numbers, what might be more relevant is looking at them a year out from when they're actually drafted. So if we look at the numbers of Phillips compared to what Rowell did and Anderson did the year before they got picked, well, Phillips really across the board performed quite a lot stronger. He was behind Anderson on score assists, but otherwise, well, his numbers are really superior. And additionally, you could argue it was probably harder for Phillips to get more numbers because of simply how stacked the Oakley midfield was last year, headed up, of course, by Rowell and Anderson. So the obvious question to ask is, well, is Will Phillips as good as Matt Rowell or Noah Anderson? Well, at the same age, well, his numbers on paper are actually favourable, but will he be a better footballer? Well, he could be comparable in quality to Noah Anderson, but will he be better than Rowell? For me, that's going to be hard. I think Rowell could be one of, if not the best midfielder in the competition, whereas with Phillips, I'm looking at him as a pretty sure A-grader, assuming he works hard, has a pretty good run with injuries and all that. Should he be the first midfielder picked in the draft? For me, the answer's a pretty sure yes. He would be certainly my pick given the performances he has on the board. Should he be the first player picked? For me, no. That's either Jamari Ugle-Hagan or Logan McDonald. They're the 2 standouts for me, with Logan McDonald, of course, making the Waffle Team of the Year and Ugle-Hagan doing some absolutely freakish stuff, and of course he'll feature in a future video. So should you be picking Will Phillips for your Supercoach teams? Well, assuming he's picked 1, the answer for me is a definite yes. He'll find a heap of it. He'll score very high, particularly in Supercoach, but AFL Fantasy he'll find more than enough of it to justify the price tag, I'm sure.
And then we've also got the question of, well, where does he need to improve? So, of course, he's a great contested ball winner, first possession winner. He has that burst out of stoppages. He finds more than enough of it, so ticks across those areas. But in terms of positional versatility, well, I'm looking at him as a pure mid at this stage, where although he kicked a few goals in the final series, he only kicked, I believe it was something like 3 goals for the year. So I'm not really confident that you could necessarily stick him forward. Maybe you could put him back, maybe you could provide some run, but at this stage is really just a midfielder. And I'm also looking at his kicking. I've seen a few inconsistencies last year, so I'd like that to be cleaned up. But otherwise he'll continue to, I guess, keep working on his ball winning, keep working on bursting out of the stoppage, getting to more contests, but all those areas I'm pretty confident he'll more than achieve. Thanks guys for watching to the end, and make sure you like, subscribe and hit the notification for future updates, and let me know in the comment section below if there's any other players you'd like to hear about in the lead up to the draft, and if there's any other content that would interest you. Thanks guys, see you in the next video.